The incredible truth revealed. How a millionaire in a coma squeezed a hand with hidden emotion. Jake Donovan stood frozen in his father's hospital room, the dim light casting harsh shadows on the sterile walls. He had spent most nights looming over his father's slumbering figure, cradled in a cocoon of beeping machines. This was not the legacy Roger Donovan had built, a legacy marked by steel and glass, soaring heights and whispered ambitions that loomed over him like a dark specter. The rich tapestry of wealth had woven an intricate net of expectations, each thread tightening with every breath his father took, or didn't. Jake's heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead. Would his father ever wake up to see him step into a role he had been groomed for since birth? Or would he just remain the shadow of the man who towered above the town? The air hung heavy with unspoken words. Missing the warmth of his father's guiding hand, Jake felt suffocated by the weight of the family empire he was being pushed to inherit. He wasn't sure he was cut from the same cloth. After all, his father had carved masterpieces, while Jake's designs had only resulted in a few minor projects. And now, with Roger's coma, the family was scrambling. Would he be able to lead them? What if he failed? He grasped the chair, wood pressing into his palms, as he thought about the community housing project he had come across in Roger's late-night sketches. Every detail dripped with unexpressed desire, a yearning to give back in a town that had shaped their lives but withered under prosperity's weight. Jake's chest constricted. The responsibility seemed insurmountable. What if the project didn't resonate? What if it only served to deepen the abyss between family members? His nightmares mingled with guilt. Was he ready to step from his father's shadow while still grappling with feelings of inadequacy? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As laundered linen encased his father's frail form, Jake was jolted back to life by vivid memories. Sarah, the schoolteacher, flickered in the back of his mind, with her passionate discussions about lifting families from despair. Their collaboration ignited a fire in him, yet he felt the looming danger of misunderstanding adopted by outsiders. To embrace the project meant squeezing through the door of judgment that surrounded his family, and it yawned before him, dark and unforgiving. The moment grew dire. The weight of his indecision held him paralyzed. He glanced at his father again, what he wouldn't give for a reply, a sign of understanding. Suddenly, the sterile atmosphere shifted. A flicker of emotion coursed through the cold. Inexplicably, with a soft creak, Roger's fingers twitched, curling around Jake's hand in the broken silence. It was slight, almost imperceptible, yet the connection crackled, heating the air around Jake, making his knees weaken. Was it a shared recognition, a moment bearing the weight of memory? Questions spiraled in his mind as he battled the suffocating expectation. Jake stared into his father's visage, desperately searching for a spark of familial recognition amidst the shadows. Could this handclasp be where hope began? As he wrestled with the gravity of familial ties and expectations, Jake felt a tempest brewing inside. Could he seize this moment for change without losing his identity? The lines divided ambition and compassion blurred dangerously, leaving him breathless, vulnerable, standing on the precipice of his father's dreams, fearing not just to succeed, but also to fail. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs as he processed the subtle movement of his father's fingers. The sensation bloomed within him, igniting a flicker of hope and a surge of urgency. This could be a moment worth grasping, not just for himself, but for the legacy he feared he might never truly claim. Determined to ease the suffocating weight of doubt, Jake leaned closer to Roger, the familiar scent of antiseptic and faintly of his father's cologne punctuating the air between them. "Dad, if you can hear me," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. I have to make a choice. In the silence, the beeping monitors kept rhythm, yet they seemed to echo his inner turmoil. He wrestled with the haunting vision of a family divided, torn by his mere existence as Roger's son. Every hesitant step away from the comfortable yet stifling shadow of his father's success felt treacherous. Yet every passing moment illuminated an inkling of self-growth. Could he shift his perspective from fear of failure to the allure of innovation? He swallowed the bitter taste of doubt and summoned the resolve he had learned to cultivate in the midst of his insecurities. Maybe I can do this, he murmured, feeling emboldened by Roger's faint but tangible grip. A swell of determination surged, staving off the paralyzing grip of anxiety. He would take on the project, his father's dream of a community housing initiative that would bless a town in need, perhaps as much as he needed it himself. The decision, although daunting, felt like stepping through the door his father had always urged him towards. This could be the bridge between their generational ambitions and the values Jake fervently believed in. Leaving the hospital room felt like a metamorphosis. As he strode down the sterile corridor, a newfound vigor filled his stride. He had a vision, a plan fueled by the sketches he had seen and the potential that unveiled itself like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. His mind raced with possibilities: the design, the community partnerships, the outreach to support those who shared his father's desire to see the less fortunate thrive. Yet, mixed with that excitement, came trepidation. Would the board of directors accept his vision? Would they perceive it as mere folly, a wayward son grasping at straws? There would be questions, criticisms, and the sharp darts of comparison to Roger's illustrious career. The prospect unnerved him, but he was learning that discomfort was often the prelude to growth. Jake found himself seated at a nearby cafe, the steam from his coffee curling upward, mirroring his thoughts. As he sipped, he replayed conversations with Sarah, how her insights illuminated paths he hadn't considered before. Reaching out to her now felt imperative. Her tenacity could provide just the push he needed to navigate the nuances of community relations that would undoubtedly surface. His phone buzzed, breaking the reverie. With a heavy heart and a pounding excitement, he stared at the name flashing on the screen. Sarah Thompson. The moment had come. He couldn't ignore fate this time. Jake took a deep breath, fingers trembling as he accepted the call, feeling the wicked mix of anxiety and exhilaration. But what he didn't know was that Sarah had her own revelations to share, ones that could challenge not only the path he envisioned, but also the very foundation of the Donovan legacy. The tension surged within him as he answered, eager to listen, but bracing for what might unfold. Jake, Sarah began, her voice steady yet tinged with urgency. There's something you need to know. It's about the project. The words hung in the air like a weight, pulling at Jake's resolve even as they ignited curiosity. What about it? He leaned closer, willing his heart to settle. He couldn't afford more revelations that would complicate his already turbulent thoughts. The sketches in his mind burst with growing ideas, but now, those dreams felt like delicate glass, ready to shatter if prodded too hard. While I fully support your vision, I've uncovered discrepancies in the funding sources, Sarah replied, her tone shifting to a more serious pitch. The board might not be as enamored with your approach as you hope. Some of the funds they're considering come with hidden strings attached. Jake's stomach churned as a knot of fear tightened. What do you mean? Are they backing us? Are they? Yes, but at a cost. There are expectations tied to those funds, and not all of them align with the community's best interests. She hesitated, then pressed on. We need to prepare for this. It's not just about your father's dreams. It's about the people who will ultimately rely on this initiative. The gravity of her words sunk in. Jake's vision expanded, weaving through calculations of ethical responsibility. He could envision the community next to his drawings, families revitalized, hopeful faces staring at the sky as they moved into homes built from love and compassion. It felt so beautifully profound, until reality pierced through like a jagged edge. "What do you suggest we do?" he inquired, feeling urgency twisting within him. She had leverage, and that could be the key he needed to navigate this labyrinth of expectations. "First, you need to bring this matter up with the board, but you cannot just present your ideas blindly. You must arm yourself with knowledge. Research potential investors outside of the board's initial pool, gather alternatives. Create a sustainable plan that doesn't rely on strings," Sarah advised. "But that's not all. There's something else I found. Something about your father." He leaned back. The cafe sounds muffled as the revelation sank in. "What about him?" "Before the accident," she said, finally breaking through his silence with a whispered urgency. "He had been in talks to withdraw from the charity program that decided on the fund allocations. He had concerns. Serious ones." "How do you know that?" I saw papers, Jake. Confidential documents he was reviewing. There was a meeting he intended to attend before everything changed." Her breath caught. There might be a reason he was holding on so tightly to the project. A heat rose within Jake, anger and confusion interspersed with fear for his father's legacy. So he had doubts? And I'm about to dive headfirst into what? An unknown? Sarah's voice softened. "It's not just an unknown. It's an opening. Your father's instincts could offer the very mentorship you need. This is a chance to confront these legacies, to mold your own path within what you've inherited." Jake's mind exploded with possibilities, spiraling toward both hope and doubt. What did it mean to claim part of a legacy he was still grappling to understand? And could he really forge a different path by uncovering the intricacies of what had previously resided in the shadows? He swallowed hard, determination igniting again. It was no longer solely about fulfilling his father's dream, but about crafting a reality that spoke to the community's true needs without shackling it to the old ways. "Let's find out more. I'll speak to the board and confront the hidden truths. If my father had doubts, then perhaps I should harness them." The sense of purpose blossomed, yet underneath it simmered an anxiety thicker than before. Jake was stepping into a storm without knowing what awaited him. "Let's meet later to plan. We can strategize through these angles," Sarah encouraged. But Jake could feel the tension pulling at them both as they caught sight of the clock. Time would not wait for revelations. "Yeah, let's do it," he replied, a promise hidden in his voice. "Jake, just understand," she warned. "Whatever you pursue, you'll need confidence. You'll need to confront not just the board but also the ghosts of your father's decisions." The end of their call echoed in his ears, vibrating through the burgeoning resolve within him. The moment felt imminent, drawing him closer to a confrontation that could shape not just his future, but the futures of many. And as he set his cup down, idea after idea thrumming in his head, his thoughts turned ominously toward the meeting to come. The time had come to face the truths buried beneath ambition and doubt that threatened to overwhelm him. As shadows danced in the corners of his mind, he asked himself, would he emerge stronger or further entangled in the Donovan legacy's grip? Jake stared blankly at the walls of his small apartment, his mind racing with the weight of Sarah's revelations. The air was thick with uncertainty, amplifying the anxiety that gnawed at him. It was a silence that crackled with potential, threatening to explode into a cacophony of doubts if he didn't act soon. He was on the precipice of something monumental. He could feel it in his bones, but knowing what to do next felt like grasping at smoke. He understood now that the project extended far beyond mere architecture. His father's legacy was intertwined with a vast web of expectations, ethical quandaries, and past decisions that haunted them both. It was time to reclaim what belonged to him by confronting the ominous shadows left in the wake of his father's choices. How could he transform the abyss of confusion into structured strategies? The looming board meeting weighed heavily on him. His pulse quickened with each tick of the clock. It would require more than mere confidence. It would demand a radical and unapologetic scope of understanding, a deep dive into the murky depths of not just the funding, but his father's unvoiced concerns. He pulled out his laptop, the screen illuminating a world of knowledge waiting to be harnessed. The task was immense. He needed to dissect the board's dynamics, study each member's vested interests, and unearth their motivations. A singular thought echoed inside him. If his father had doubted this project, there had to be sound reasoning behind it, and perhaps a path to steer clear of impending pitfalls. Jake began to outline a plan. It wasn't enough to simply counter the board's narrative. He needed to challenge its very foundation. As he typed furiously, he envisioned presenting not only the project's merits, but also alternative funding strategies that did not tether the initiative to corrosive constraints. What his father feared could well be his greatest motivation. Several hours evaporated in a blur, and just as exhaustion threatened to claim him, sparks of creativity ignited. He scoured online forums for unconventional investors, possibilities that had previously eluded his father's vision. He felt emboldened, as if he were finally breaking free from the constraints of expectation that had long held him captive. Each potential alternative he encountered made him realize the risk of complacency that had gripped his father during the twilight of his tenure. He documented everything meticulously, imagining how he would navigate the board's skepticism once it's time for them to confront him. This was not just about salvaging a flame that had dimmed. This was about fostering a wildfire of transformation. As the clock ticked away, Jake dismissed the shivers of panic that lurked at the edges of his thoughts. He would not let fear dictate his path. He was on the verge of reclaiming his voice, resurrecting his father's concerns, and transforming them into a shield rather than a sword that could craft it in a destructive manner. It was almost dawn when he finally leaned back, fatigue pulling at his eyelids. Jake stared at the pile of ideas, strategies, and insights before him. He had woven a narrative from the ashes of uncertainty, but it was now time to share this with Sarah, the anchor who had helped him recognize the strength that came from confronting his fears. Composing a quick email, he hit send, a rush of resolve surging through him. His heart raced as he realized he was not merely preparing for a board meeting. He was stepping into the arena, battling against unseen currents of legacy that sought to define him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with incoming news. It was from Sarah. "Jake, we need to talk. There's something important I uncovered about the fund allocation documents." His breath caught in his throat. The deeper layer was waiting to be peeled back, and whatever lay beneath could redefine everything he had worked for. He could feel the stakes escalating, shifting the ground beneath him just as he began to find his footing. The confrontation wasn't just with the board. It was with decades of decisions cloaked in uncertainties. As a whirlwind of emotions swirled within him, Jake turned to face the shadows once more. Just when he thought he was gaining ground, something deeper loomed ominously, ready to challenge his resolve once again. Jake sat at his desk, a vessel of anticipation and dread. The silent hum of the early morning wrapped around him like a thick fog, blurring the lines of clarity he so desperately sought. He replayed Sarah's message in his head, each word punctuating the reality that further complications lay ahead. The delicate fabric he had begun to weave was trembling on the edge of unraveling. He needed answers. The very foundation he was trying to secure for his father's project could shift dramatically with whatever Sarah had uncovered. Tapping his fingers against the desk, Jake willed himself to breathe steadily, resisting the urge to spiral into anxiety. A sudden determination surged through him. Even if what Sarah revealed was troubling, he was resolved. Knowledge equated to power. The darkness of ignorance had haunted him long enough. The more he delved into the intricacies of the board, the clearer his own path became. Preparing for a confrontation was essential not merely for the project, but for his own evolution as a leader, as a man capable of stepping beyond the shadows of his father's legacy. Minutes felt like hours as he waited for Sarah to arrive. He rifled through his notes, sharpening his plans. Jake visualized their conversation, her insights revealing layers of hidden truths. What would he do if this news steered the project into uncharted waters? Instead of retreating into worry, He focused on the ways he could leverage any information to manipulate the board's perspective, bolster his arguments, and defy the skepticism he knew awaited him. A knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. It opened slightly, revealing Sarah's anxious face. She stepped in, her demeanor taut with urgency. "Jake?" she began, her voice faltering under the weight of her revelation. "I've been digging through the fund allocation documents, and there's something that changes everything." He motioned her to sit, feeling the tension double between them. "What did you find?" he pressed, leaning forward. "There's a large sum that was categorized as miscellaneous funding, but looking deeper into the documentation suggests it was allocated for a project similar to yours. Something that could undermine everything we're trying to build here." A knot twisted in Jake's stomach as he processed her words. His initial reaction was anger at the thought of his father potentially approving something that could sabotage his own legacy. Yet this anger was swiftly followed by realization. This information served as a weapon. He needed to exploit the board's hidden motives, their reluctance to invest in a project that could falter under secretive dealings. "What else can we uncover?" he asked, his mind racing with strategies. This was no longer merely about defending the project. It was also about attacking the credibility of those who would oppose him. "There are inconsistencies in the documents, records that don't add up. I think if we present this right, we can create doubt about the priorities of the board. Some of them have connections to that fund. If we expose them..." Jake nodded, the pieces of the puzzle clumping together in his mind. "We can expose the conflicts of interest. We can turn suspicion against them. If they're tied to that funding, it'll discredit their resistance to my project." His voice grew steady, reclaiming the confidence that flickered earlier. "This is our chance, Sarah. We can frame the narrative. We need to act quickly before they anticipate our strategy." The weight of urgency shifted from uncertainty to a fervent drive, igniting a newfound sense of purpose among them. Jake could feel the specters of doubt lifting, replaced with the anticipation of power. They spent the next few hours detailing the document inconsistencies, building their case and heightening their resolve. A jolt of empowerment coursed through him with each revelation. He was no longer merely searching for his authentic voice. He was actively forging it, constructing a foundation upon which both he and his father's legacy could stand. As they finalized their presentation, a flash of doubt crept in again. What if this was a double-edged sword? What if they stirred up more trouble than they bargained for? "Sarah," Jake paused, turning to her intently. "Are we prepared for the fallout?" Her eyes narrowed, filled with conviction. "We have to be. This is about more than you or me now. This is about shifting the narrative, Jake. We can't back down." The weight of her words hung in the air as they prepared to step into the lion's den. Jake realized this confrontation was inevitable, but he had to control the narrative for once. And with that thought circling in his head, he suddenly wondered, could this be the moment where everything he fought for could either lift him to greatness or plunge him into chaos? The board meeting awaited. With it came the moment of truth, a test of his burgeoning leadership, and the looming specter of confrontation. Jake's heart raced as he and Sarah entered the dimly lit boardroom, the air thick with tension. The table loomed large, encircled by the very men and women whose votes would determine the future of his father's project, and by extension, his own legacy. Each face was a mask, a veneer that concealed the motives Jake sought to expose. He followed Sarah to their designated seats, but he remained acutely aware of the eyes that scrutinized him. They were the gatekeepers of his aspirations. The board meeting was more than just an obligatory congregation. It was a crucible where he would either become the leader he aspired to be or be crushed under the weight of his inexperience. "All right, everyone. Let's get started," the chairperson, Mr. Lawson, announced. His tone was grave, more as if presiding over a funeral than a corporate presentation. Jake swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe deeply. He watched as Sarah clicked through the slides of their carefully crafted presentation. Each bullet point was designed not only to outline the project's potential, but to subtly unveil the misgivings clouding the board's judgments. There was power in that knowledge, Jake reminded himself. Today, we'll first address the project's potential impact, Sarah began confidently, her voice breaking through the chilling silence. As she spoke, Jake's focus shifted from the content to their audience. The wavering interest of each board member, the eyebrows raised in skepticism, the tapping fingers that betrayed impatience. Jake felt his resolve crystallizing into a sharp focus. This wasn't merely a fight for his project. This was about asserting his role in a world he had always tried to navigate in his father's shadow. The presentation unfolded smoothly, until they arrived at the segment regarding the inconsistencies in the fund allocation. Sarah displayed the documents on the screen, her finger gesturing towards the alarming figures. As you can see, there were large sums redirected under vague categorizations. We believe this funding was mismanaged at a critical juncture, and the implications here are substantial. A murmur rippled through the room. The board members exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their features. It was the opening Jake had hoped for. He leaned forward, his voice steady but charged with adrenaline. We are not only concerned about our project's future, but about the integrity of this board. If members have direct ties to funds that are being mishandled, we risk losing credibility not only with our stakeholders, but within our own industry. A sharp silence filled the room. Eyes darted between Jake and the more established members of the board. The palpable tension intensified, crackling like electricity. But then, Mr. Lawson's voice sliced through the air. You're making serious accusations, Jake. Do you think you have the standing to question our integrity? The challenge was clear, a deliberate attempt to put Jake back into that subordinate role. A flicker of doubt ignited within him, but just as quickly, it morphed into a fiery determination. This was his moment. He refused to cower before the ghosts of his insecurities. In light of the evidence we've presented, I don't think it's unreasonable for us to discuss these issues openly. After all, the success of our initiative hinges on transparency and trust, he said, matching Mr. Lawson's unwavering gaze. Their eyes locked, and in that instant, Jake realized the stakes. This was more than his father's legacy. This was about claiming his identity, about disentangling himself from being a mere pawn in a game he never chose to play. With a renewed sense of purpose pulsing through him, he added, I'm prepared to challenge the status quo. If it means protecting the future of our venture, then I'll take that leap. Jake felt the shift in energy in the room. Uncertainty turned into cautious attention. As the board members began to murmur among themselves, he turned to Sarah, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The tension was tangible. Their combined resolve suddenly the cornerstone of a change neither had anticipated. As Sarah prepared to dive back into the presentation, a quiet knock echoed at the door behind them. In walked a figure Jake recognized instantly, the CEO of a rival company. Why was he here? Had someone tipped them off? With that unsettling realization, Jake's stomach dropped as he recognized the potential implications of this uninvited presence. His heart pounded as he braced himself for the confrontation that loomed ahead, both with the board and now with an unexpected adversary. The moment of truth was at hand, and Jake was about to learn just how deep the rabbit hole went. Jake's breath hitched as he processed the unexpected arrival of the rival CEO. The room, once a battlefield between him and the board, transformed into a daunting arena open to outside threats. He had been ready for confrontation, but not for the tactical unpredictability this visitor introduced. The CEO strolled confidently, a predatory gleam in his eye. Jake recognized him not just as a competitor, but as a figure who had thrived in cutthroat environments where every move was calculated and lethal. This wasn't just a disruption, it was a power play, and Jake realized he had to remain grounded or risk losing everything he'd fought for that day. "Gentlemen and ladies," the newcomer spoke, his tone dripping with faux politeness. "I couldn't help but overhear. The topic of mismanaged funds and integrity is quite the hot-button issue." His gaze settled on Jake, eyebrows raised in a mix of amusement and curiosity. "I must applaud your boldness, young man. But are you aware of what happens to fragile projects in troubled waters?" Jake felt the weight of the board's eyes shift from him to the interloper. The stakes escalated, and he realized the urgency of his situation. He wasn't merely defending an initiative. He was defending his credibility on a much larger scale. This was no longer just about the project. It was about who Jake was becoming, a leader willing to fight against the tide even when faced with fearsome opposition. "Your timing is impeccable," Jake replied, his voice steady yet laced with the tension of the moment. "But I believe it's imperative to focus on the content of our presentation rather than enigmatic commentary on troubled waters. Wouldn't you agree?" He felt a surge of confidence as he framed his answer carefully, avoiding any bait that could draw him into a trap. The CEO smirked, clearly entertained by the challenge Jake presented. "Oh, but I'd hate to miss the show," he mused, his tone condescending. "Besides, if you're truly betting on the success of this venture, you should consider the short-term implications of running against powerful tides, financially and socially." With each word, Jake's resolve solidified. This was a direct assault on his credibility, and every comment made by the CEO was a reminder of the risks he faced. But instead of reacting defensively, Jake decided to embrace the tension, channeling it toward a strategic advantage. "Let me remind everyone present," Jake said, locking eyes with the board, "that it's precisely the risks we face today that highlight the necessity for transparency. This isn't about climbing a ladder. It's about constructing a foundation. If we don't expose the truth behind the numbers, we risk more than just a misallocation of funds. We risk our entire future." A slight shift in the air suggested a change in perspective among the board members. Doubtful glances became contemplative stares, as if Jake had given them a glimpse of clarity. He felt empowered, his earlier insecurities overshadowed by a sense of purpose that pulsed through him like an electric current. The CEO shifted uneasily, but rather than retreat from his position, he pressed on. "Ambition, I respect. Yet naivety can be detrimental. Each of you should think long and hard about the potential fallout from this." The tension spiked. Jake needed to pivot the conversation and rally their attention back on the evidence Sarah had presented. "Or perhaps the true danger lies in ignoring the problems at hand," he argued, turning back toward the board. "We have data that shows a pattern of mismanagement. Are we really going to allow ourselves to be clouded by external threats instead of addressing our own vulnerabilities?" Jake's heart raced as he observed the board members exchanging hesitant glances, sensing a shift. He had turned the momentum in his favor, yet doubt lingered, creeping in the corners of his mind. Would this moment lead him to the breakthrough he craved, or would he be swallowed by forces larger than his initiative? With the external pressure of the rival CEO looming over them, Jake recognized the importance of not just rising to the occasion, but also of defining his own narrative amid the chaos, a narrative of integrity, focus, and a relentless pursuit of truth. As the board continued to weigh its options, the routine knock of the door echoed again, this time more insistent. Another unexpected visitor? The tension in the room thickened once more, and Jake found himself questioning whether the moment of truth he had fought for would slip further from his grasp. What new revelation awaited him beyond that door? The door swung open, revealing a small figure cloaked in anticipation. It was Sarah, her face flushed with urgency, clutching a folder tightly against her chest. Jake felt a flicker of hope light up within him. Sarah's commitment had been pivotal so far, and he dared to wonder what she had uncovered now. "Jake, she started. But the rival CEO raised a brow, instantly redirecting the board's attention toward the interruption. "You see, this is what happens in troubled waters," he interjected, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Unpleasant surprises from within. Quite the spectacle indeed." The board members exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions shifting from intrigue to discomfort. "Enough!" Jake's voice was sharper than he intended, rallying both Sarah and the board to his side. "Let's not lose our focus. Sarah has information that could pivot this discussion significantly." He motioned for her to come forward, feeling the moment's gravity shifting toward his control. Sarah stepped into the spotlight, her courage rekindled by Jake's show of solidarity. I've analyzed the data further, and what I found, it's not just about the mismanaged funds. It goes deeper than that. She unfolded the folder, revealing quantitative analysis charts that glimmered under the overhead lights like shining armor. Jake sensed the board's attention snapping back into focus. It was a chance to illuminate his arguments, to back his moral stances with empirical evidence. We're dealing with a pattern of detrimental financial practices, Sarah continued, each word breaking through the tension. The numbers show a consistent misalignment between projected earnings and actual revenue that indicates systemic mismanagement rather than mere oversight. Jake capitalized on Sarah's momentum, eyes flaring with determination and passion. This isn't simply another budget proposal. It's our chance to realign our values with our actions. If we allow the status quo to continue unchallenged, we endanger not just our investments, but our integrity as a company. Isn't it our responsibility to usher in a new standard? He could feel the board swaying, a collective realization washing over their faces. Even the rival CEO maintained a stiff expression, unable to mask a flicker of surprise. Jake's heart raced. This was what he needed. A breakthrough not just for the project, but for himself as a leader, capable of rallying others toward a common purpose. Yet, as confidence surged through him, doubt lingered in the rhythms of his thoughts. Was he overreaching? Was he still implicitly allowing the CEO to set the terms of this engagement, despite the power shift? While this data is compelling, Jake, the rival CEO interjected, a determined glint in his eyes. Let's not forget the external pressures, market trends, investor sentiments. Assuming success based on internal metrics might be wishful thinking at this stage. Jake raised an eyebrow, wrestling with the challenger. You've mistaken me, sir. I didn't say we should solely depend on our internal data. Rather, we must communicate our understanding of internal failures to navigate external challenges effectively. Our greatest asset is our transparency. As he spoke, Jake felt a thrill of recognition with each word he articulated. He was stepping into a new frontier where self-doubt lost its grip and was replaced by conviction. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It was about him reshaping how others perceived him, not just as an emerging leader, but as a fundamental changemaker. Yet, he remained acutely aware of the CEO's smirk. The other man's amusement seemed to narrow the narrative into a battle of wits. Before he could finish processing, a hushed whisper echoed from the back of the room, breaking through the tension like thunder. What if our numbers are worse than we thought? Jake turned sharply, locking eyes with the CFO, a mixture of dread and anticipation flooding through him. What if their optimism was misplaced? What revelation could be lurking in the darkness of their finances? The room fell silent, each breath becoming laden with a shared weight. What awaited Jake beyond the horizon, where he had dared to tread for the sake of truth? The future of his resolve hinged on the upcoming revelations, and he felt the rush of adrenaline surge all over again. As his heart raced, he realized the choices ahead would define not only his narrative, but the potential of the entire company he served. Would he emerge triumphant, or would he be engulfed by the specters of his past decisions? The path twisted unpredictably before him, making it clear. What lay beyond this moment was a tangled web that could lead to enlightenment or further ruin. Would this revelation spark the change he sought, or ignite even greater conflicts? Jake held his breath, the silence in the room throbbing with apprehension. Every pair of eyes seemed to rivet onto the CFO, who looked equally torn between fear and revelation. The moment hung in the air like a taut string ready to snap. He could almost feel the energy of the board shifting. They were caught between hope and despair, and he knew he had to take charge before they all collapsed under the weight of uncertainty. Let's not jump to conclusions, Jake urged, his voice steady, though inside, his mind raced. We need clarity. This could be an opportunity disguised as a challenge, but only if we face it head-on. He turned to Sarah, whose brows furrowed in contemplation. There was a fire in her eyes that inspired him further. "Sarah, what do the numbers suggest? Can we pinpoint where the discrepancies are stemming from?" Taking a deep breath, she responded, "From preliminary evaluations, there are specific cost centers where expenditures don't align with revenue. If we target these areas, we might uncover deeper inconsistencies." Jake nodded, grounding himself in the practical approach she suggested. "So, it's not just a broad failure. We might be able to isolate and address these issues. Let's be proactive instead of reactive. Just because there are problems doesn't mean we're doomed to fail." The rival CEO, now visibly irritated, shot a glance at Jake. "And while you're playing detective, you might want to consider how investors will react to your little game of numbers. They want confidence, not chaos." Jake sensed the board shifting again, doubt creeping back into their expressions. "Confidence comes from transparency," he countered, eyes narrowing slightly for emphasis. "Let's present a clear picture to our investors. By owning our missteps, we build trust. We can't sell a facade." There was strength in his conviction, but Jake knew he still stood on precarious ground. Gaining their trust meant confronting not just the board, but the very fabric of how they operated as a business. "We'll need to reformulate our strategy going forward, a new framework that encompasses not just profitability but also ethics in our operations." Jake felt the pulse of leadership propelling him forward. As he climbed this new hill, he could see shadows of himself looming behind. The cautious, uncertain Jake still haunted by failures of the past. Yet each challenge he articulated in this meeting chipped away at those shadows, carving out a more resolute version of himself. He felt the power of his voice change the atmosphere. "I believe in this company's mission," he continued, locking eyes with each board member. "If we care about our values and our people, they will care about us in return. It is in this authenticity that we will thrive." The room's tension shifted again, this time toward something palpable and more positive. Jake sensed the gears began to turn in the minds of his colleagues, but the specter of doubt still loomed, whispering that the road ahead might not be so straightforward. Then the CFO spoke again, this time with a trembling voice. "But if the audit shows worse results, how do we re-establish our reputation? Can our image withstand the scrutiny?" Jake took a moment, letting the weight of that question sink in. The stakes had been laid bare. The task ahead appeared monumental, yet Jake felt a spark ignite deep within. "We must embrace the truth in all its forms. Whatever the audit reveals, we will not hide from it. We will confront it as a united front. Because change starts from acknowledgement." In that moment, he realized he was not just fighting for the company, but for a form of personal redemption. Failure was inevitable, but how they responded to it could reshape not only their collective future, but define Jake's legacy as a leader. As the meeting drew to a close, a sense of uncertainty had replaced what was once pessimism. Plans were set in motion, analytics would dig deeper, and a wave of determination swept through the room. Confidence emerged not only from financial data, but from the newfound alignment of shared vision. Yet a question gnawed at him, one that began to take form as the board members filed out. How would they respond when confronted with their darkest financial truths? This looming confrontation could either cement the new direction or lay waste to their hopes. Jake took a deep breath, knowing the next session would be pivotal. The time had come to face the raw reality, or risk losing everything he had fought to build. What awaited him and his team in the weeks to come would ultimately test them beyond numbers and projections. His resolve grew. He could not retreat now. It was time to dive deeper into the unknown. As he prepared for what lay ahead, he felt the undeniable pull of resolve, driving him forward. In his mind, the question crystallized with painful clarity. Could he truly lead them through this impending storm, or would he unravel under the pressure of his past mistakes? In the ensuing weeks, the tension in the boardroom morphed into an unexpected rhythm, much like an orchestra tuning itself before a grand concert. Jake plunged headfirst into a meticulous analysis of the departmental reports. For the first time in his life, he was not merely the son of a titan. He was the architect of his own destiny, and it felt invigorating. He organized meetings with department heads, meticulously dissecting every discrepancy, unearthing inefficiencies with a relentless pursuit of clarity. The project's ultimate fate loomed, but the momentum had shifted firmly in Jake's favor. The boards were imbued with a newfound spirit. His earlier assertiveness transformed their reservations into cautious enthusiasm. They rallied around the promise of ethical transparency, invigorated by the possibility of a rejuvenated company mission, guided by integrity rather than imposed fear. With every meeting he presided over, Jake demonstrated a robust understanding of the metrics, wielding his growing competence like a shield against doubt. "Let's make informed decisions grounded in factual analysis," he would assert, his voice no longer wavering but imbued with certainty. The praise from his colleagues reverberated through the office, igniting a spark of camaraderie. Simultaneously, he strategized alongside Sarah, cultivating a plan to present to the board, a comprehensive proposal not only addressing the new funding routes, but reinforcing their adherence to ethical stewardship. Their late-night brainstorming sessions transformed from uncertainties into blueprints for a brighter future. Then came the decisive day when the report was to be unveiled, the proverbial exam where all their efforts would be tested. The assurance buzzed in the air, yet Jake sensed an unshakable undercurrent of nervous energy. They had equipped themselves well with data, research, and insights, but the pressure of expectation still gripped him. He stood before the board once more, but this time armed not only with documentation, but also with self-belief, not as a ghost of Roger Donovan, but as Jake Donovan, a burgeoning leader in his own right. As he presented their findings, the room melted into silence. His voice commanded attention, rhythmically intertwining facts and narrative, framing the importance of their choices. "This isn't just about financial recovery. It's about the character of our company. Every decision we make will echo through these walls for years to come," he articulated, aware of every gaze studying him and increasingly more familiar with the peculiar weight of authority. Jake finished. The weight lifted as his words hung in the room. Slowly, applause erupted. It was a recognition of not just achievements, but of growth. The board members, once skeptical pillars of his father's legacy, regarded him with a newly found respect. Moments later, Mr. Lawson stood to offer formal approval. "It appears we're fortunate to have a new vision guiding us through this tempest, Jake," he said, extending a hand. Jake's heart swelled. The acknowledgement was tangible, and in that moment, years of uncertainty lit up with purpose. Weeks turned to months, and as the housing project launched successfully, Jake reveled in the construction sites bustling with activity. Community partners rallied, eager to bring Roger's dream to fruition under Jake's innovative governance. Families began to envision homes where once despair resided. He marveled at the tangible embodiment of his growth. Transformation manifested not in mere buildings but in hope, belonging, and purpose. As he stood at the site of the first completed unit, Jake found stillness amidst the chaos. The sun illuminated the structures, shadows dancing as children played around them. For the first time, he saw more than just structures reaching toward the sky. He saw the potential for lives changed and grateful faces blossoming under roofs built with ambition. "Satisfied?" Sarah's voice pulled him from his reverie. Jake turned and smiled, a sense of fulfillment coursing through him. "More than I ever could have imagined." His heart swelled with gratitude for the journey taken. The challenges, doubts, and changes he navigated fueled a legacy far deeper than he initially believed. "What's next for us, then?" she inquired, nagging curiosity prompting her question. "I think it's time we design the next steps for our community initiatives," he replied, confidence finally solidly rooted within him. In that moment, as they outlined the future, Jake Donovan stood no longer a reluctant heir burdened by legacy, but a powerful leader redefining what it meant to honor that legacy through transformative action. He had conquered the demons of self-doubt and emerged not just as a son, but as an innovative architect of change, steadfast in his resolve to uplift others through tangible love. Jake smiled knowingly. He had proven, against all odds, that the whispers of legacy could be molded into a symphony of hope. And as reasons to forge ahead filled the air, he understood he had finally claimed the inheritance of not just his father's ambitions, but his own aspirations. This was his moment. The moment to embrace renewed purpose and success was finally his to claim. Jake Donovan was ready to lead, not just for his last name, but for the lives that would flourish because he dared to step boldly into the vast unknown. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this remarkable ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. You need to support the channel now. Your engagement means everything. Don't wait even one more second to share.